Hey everybody, this is Alex Merced from AlexMercedCoder.dev. And I had some downtime for around this New Year's. So what I wanted to do was create a new framework, and this is going to be sort of a long-term project, partly because I really like the name, so I kind of want to make this a thing. But also I kind of really like how this is turning out. It's called CoquitoJS. If you're not familiar with Coquito, it's a nice sweet coconut drink, heavily imbibed by us Puerto Ricans. But but the reason I chose Coquito was actually originally I wanted to call it Espresso because it's based on Express, and I thought that'd be cute. But there's, if you look up Espresso, I am not the first person to think of this. Okay, so you can see here other people have thought of Espresso. Okay, and then I looked up other types of caffeinated drinks, matcha, affogato, whatnot, you name it. There's a project that has that name. So then I looked up Coquito, and guess what? There wasn't a CoquitoJS already. So I'm like, I am claiming that. Okay, that is mine now. Okay, and basically what I want to do is just kind of create a tool that makes a lot of things easier for doing an Express app. Kind of like Express with some batteries included, not all batteries, maybe more and more so in the future. But it's going to do it through a couple of different ways. So, you see lots of different tools that, they give you sort of a track. So, you use Ruby on Rails. It's like a whole system, and you use the whole system. With Coquito, I want there to be sort of different entry points where, if you're just looking for a little bit of abstraction over Express to make things a little bit easier, you get that. But if you want more and more to the full sort of Rails like, systematic experience, you'll have that available too. So right now it's a early version. The framework itself, like as far as like the underlying like libraries for the most part done, I don't anticipate I'll be making many changes to it or any changes to it at this point, because essentially the pieces that I want to be part of the actual library are there. Okay, now it's more about developer experience, so creating like CLIs and scaffolding tools. But let's walk through it. Okay, so let me go back to Coquito. And essentially what it does, it just makes it really easy. It gets rid of a lot of the boilerplate when you're setting up an Express app. Okay, so you can see here, essentially you just create like a new Coquito app, and you can just pass a lot of details. Like you can just specify whatever port you want to use. And the cool thing is, like, if the port variable is defined, it's going to use it. So you don't have to like think about it. So like a lot of the basic and the variables that you would normally be like thinking about, you don't have to. Out of the gates. When you deploy this, it's going to work. Body parsers, so you don't have to worry about like registering body parsers. You just say, hey, yep, I'd like the body parsers, URL encoded, JSON, they're going to be configured. You can specify your hosts. Those are going to be obvious. Like you could do that pretty easily with Express. Where this becomes pretty useful is nice here, like with routers and middleware. So instead of having to keep doing all these like app.use calls, you just pass an array of all sort of the endpoints you plan on writing multiple routes for, and it's going to generate a router for each one and make it a property of the object. So you can see an example here. So I say, hey, I'm going to be writing routes for /sample, and it creates a router that's going to be available at app.sample, and I can just write my routes from there. And then does the same thing for all of them. So basically, if I have and the nice thing about taking advantage of routers is by having all your routes in these nice groups, you can also make an app that has lots of routes a lot quicker. Same thing for middleware. So I can just sit there and pass it an array middleware, and it'll go through that iterative process to set up that middleware. Okay. And it's already built with like an app.listen message, so that makes that a lot easier. But again, you do have the escape hatch of app.app. So in this case, this new Coquito app object does have a property called app, so it would be app.app. That is the original Express object. So anytime you want to say like, you know what, I'm just, for this thing that I'm trying to do, I just want to do it the way I'm used to doing it in Express, you can always use the escape hatch of app.app. It'll always let you just sort of be like, no, I'm going to do this part this way. I only want maybe X features. Because you'll see in a second, another really cool feature in the constructor is you can pretty much spring up a GraphQL and RPC API in a few seconds. Okay, so to show you that, okay, so again, see like there you can see like the escape hatch. Again, a little bit more like nuances of things you can do as far as setting up views in your static folder. So you can actually pass a property that define a static folder. All this stuff is, and you can also just define a pre-hook. So let's say you do want to take advantage of all of Coquito's features, but you want to run some code before the middleware and routers get registered. You can define a function called the pre-hook that'll run before all that other stuff runs. So basically it'll be right after the app object gets created, and you can maybe like configure a view engine or configure anything you want to kind of configure. Probably you would only need it if you knew you needed it. Okay, then here's just an example of how you can split it up with multiple files. Here's an example of how you can set up a GraphQL API. So literally all it takes is just make a root value, which is all your resolvers, a schema, and then basically once you define your root value, again, your resolvers, your functions, and your schema, the definition of your GraphQL API, you would just, in your new Coquito app, you would just pass that over to this GraphQL property, and there you go. You have a GraphQL API running on /GraphQL, and that'll work with any GraphQL client. And you'll see the extra thing I did when we get to the template. Okay. Then also, again, a couple weeks ago, I made my own simple RPC framework. So my own RPC framework, simple RPC, which basically allows you to create an RPC API that feels a lot like using Redux on the front end. So essentially you use like a dispatch function and you pass in a type and payload. If you've used Redux, you're kind of familiar with that sort of way of dispatching state altering functions, except this code would run server side instead of it being in your client. But even this is pretty easy to spin up. You would just define your actions. Again, your list of functions that you'd want to be able to call. Context, which is just any other data you want available to your actions. And then again, when you construct your Coquito app, you just pass in you define this RPC property, and then you'll have your RPC API running on /RPC. Okay, and essentially all you have to do is, essentially what a client will do is just make a post request to /RPC with a body that looks kind of like this. A type stating which function to run, and a payload that essentially acts as like the arguments to that function. Okay, and the cool thing is you could set both of them up. Okay, and you'll see me do that exactly in just a few moments. Okay, in the future, again, I'm going to try to create some more scaffolding, CLI tools. What I want to do is create like essentially an API where you could actually create your own scaffolding script, so that way you can scaffold something that's really tailored to your particular application. And then of course CLI for like incremental scaffolding. So if you need to add an additional controller, if you need to add it, you can just add it. You don't have to kind of think through everything at the beginning, at the initial scaffolding. So still thinking through how I want to do that. But right now there's an easy entry point. You can either go to the repo, and you can just click on use this template, and this repo is a template. Okay, so this is a template I made that already has kind of everything set up for you, so that way you can literally just build your app. So basically you have Coquito, and then you're going to have a bunch of other stuff that I built for you here in this template. And you can also just generate that template by running this dgit command. So basically these are sort of the two pillars of the project. So again, as far as like the core library, anything that comes forward is really going to be scaffolding features. And then, and I might end up just building those features into the template instead, where there just might be a script that you can run from the template. I've done that once before, but I would like sort of like a nice inbuilt CLI just to do it. But yeah, so let's actually try it out. So if I take this command to spin up a project, so I'm going to click terminal over here, and then I'm just going to run this command here. We'll give the project a name, so we'll call it sample. Okay, and what it's going to do is just going to create a clone without a repo. Okay, so it's running. So right now it's cloning it, and then it's going to remove the repo. That's what dgit does. But it is taking its time. Okay. I think it got stuck somewhere. I'm gonna run that again. Just make sure that it went fine. Move to trash. but I want to make sure I'm using the latest version of dgit. So I'm going to add the @latest flag, because sometimes my computer likes to cache old versions of things. And we'll say sample. Yep. Okay, let it do that. Yep, there we go. That worked better. Okay, so you see that? It cloned it, although it looks like there's still a repo there. Oh, it's because this is inside of another repo, that's why. Okay, that's fine. Okay, cool. So let's cd into the project. So cd into sample. And then I'm going to run an npm install for it to install all the libraries. Okay. Boom, boom, boom. And then it should be ready to go working right out of the box. npm start. And there you go. And you see you get the server status message. Right now, you know, there's a template.env here, so you can change that to .env if you want to like just use that. There'll probably be more variables in there in the future as I add stuff. But yeah, like this is the server.js. So I'm importing all the stuff from the other files, bringing in the .env variables. Here what I did is I configured cores, so that way you can define your cores options in this cores.js file, but they would only apply in production. Okay, so basically when you're working locally, you don't have to worry about like cores getting in the way. Okay, then here I have a prehook just to kind of configure EJS, because EJS is there built in, but you can easily switch it to any view engine you'd like, especially ones that are built to work with Express. But theoretically, you could use anything you'd like. You just would have to do whatever extra work to get it to work with Express. Okay. But yeah, here I create the new Coquito app. So we're stating, hey, like this public folder is a static folder. It's going to have the body parsers, so that's going to be working. Okay. There's my middleware. So right now we just have the cores middleware and Morgan for logging. Okay, here I just created two dummy routers, router 1, router 2, just so you can see how they work. Okay, then we have the GraphQL API configured, the RPC API configured, of course, look, and again we run that prehook. Cool. Okay, here I'm just doing the root route because the root doesn't get a router, so it's just app.app.get. And then here, what I'm doing is I'm registering all the routes with these routers in a separate file. So in the controllers folder, each of these, what I used to do is I just write a function that receives the router, and I register all my routes with it. Okay, so in this case, this would be all the routes for router 1, and these would be all the routes for router 2. And you would just kind of follow that pattern. Okay, and then here's my root value defining all my functions for my GraphQL API. Okay, and then here's the schema for that GraphQL API. And again, you could just read up on GraphQL schemas and build it out. So again, you would add any query, any functions that get stuff to the query type, and any functions that change things like create, update, delete to the mutation category. And then again, any type of data you work with, you would define, and then what you would do is you would just create the corresponding functions here by the same name, and then that'll all work. Okay. Then we have the RPC API. Okay, here in RPC, here we have actions, just functions. They get called by their name. So you would just write as many functions as you want inside this actions object. And then that's all that's what powers it. Okay. Cool. But yeah, it's all there. And again, you have views here. Now here's where we got some cool stuff that I built out. Like basically I'm right now using EJS. As you can see here, I have this like example include where you can include this head.ejs that's already built in there, and you can specify like a different JavaScript file because you might want different JavaScript to run different pages. So you would just create those JavaScript files in the public folder and then put the right name here. Same thing with if you want different CSS files and different pages, just do that there. But in that head.ejs, okay, I do have these two scripts that are going to be there all the time. And essentially this is going to have all your clients. Okay, so you never need to touch this. So this is like the simple RPC client code. I just copied it over into here. So that way you have it locally. Okay, and then here I configure that client. So here's we create the RPC client. So RPC dispatch. And here we create the GraphQL client. So you have both of those already set for you to go. So now you can just start using them, and using them just looks like this. Like here's the code for making an RPC call. So if you wanted to call one of those functions that were defined in the backend, you would just say, hey, this is the function I want to call. here's the data that I want to send to it, and then it's going to give you back the result. And then again, you see the result here. If you want to use a GraphQL query, hey, you just need a string with your query in it. You pass it to the GraphQL client. Okay, it's going to return you the result, and ta-da. Okay, so essentially, like a lot of that setup is just done for you. Okay, now of course, if you wanted to go build a separate React app or Vue app or Solid.js app, you can. You just use this to set up those APIs, and then you just use your favorite clients or the simple RPC client library with those libraries. Okay, but it's all working. So like right now the server is working. Let me show you an example of each of these things that work. So if I go to localhost 4000, okay, and I open up there, you can see the results of those calls. So the RPC call and the GraphQL call. Okay, nice. Okay, and again, if I open up Insomnia, so like right here, localhost 4000, right now here's like my RPC call. So basically what the client is going to do is just underlying is just making a post request to that route. Cool, and it works. Okay, and then if I were to do like a GraphQL one, so we'll say GraphQL query. That's fine. Okay, and then we're going to do that to the GraphQL endpoint. So again, you don't have to worry about setting up that route. All you have to do is just pass it the two pieces it needs for GraphQL or RPC. So for GraphQL, you just pass it the root value and the schema. For the RPC, you just pass it the actions and the context, and API set, ready to go. You just use your favorite, well, there's only one simple RPC client, the one that I made, and use your favorite GraphQL client, and you're good to go. I don't know if this currently would like work with a tool like Graphical yet, and like where it would pick up its schema. I'll take a look into like what it takes to make that happen. But yeah, let's see here. What do I want to do? Oh yeah, I wanted to make a request. So let me just copy the same query from here. So I'm just copy that string. Head over here, and again, I have it in GraphQL mode, so I'm just going to do it in the GraphQL way. Okay, and then I hit send, and see, it works. Okay, and I get some data back. So as you see here, I just cloned a project, and I have the shell of an RPC in GraphQL API available right away. But on top of it, I mean, creating a REST API would just basically mean me writing all the routes that I want to write in one of these routers. So I just go to my controllers, and I can just start writing my routes. Okay, so if I wanted to have like a /dog router, I would just add that over here. Just be like, okay, I want a /dog router, and then again, I just write like another controller file with all my routes there, pass that router to the right function, and huzzah. Okay, so I highly recommend going to play with this. I would love, if you want to contribute to the code base, whether you want to contribute to the template or you want to contribute to the base library, I encourage you to do that. I would definitely love any cool code suggestions, features. But yeah, no, I would love to see things that you build with this. If you build something, shoot me an email and I'll make a video going through your code so we can, just to see like your app at work. So have a great day. My name is Alex Merced from AlexMercedCoder.dev. So this is my new project, CoquitoJS. Literally, it's just npm install Coquito if you want to install the library. So again, you don't have to use a template. You could just use it. And again, setup is just like this. Okay. So here it walks through like how you would set it up if you were setting it up from scratch. But again, you can also use the template and just have a lot of that stuff set up for you, and you just focus on building your app. With, again, the great thing is that, again, the library kind of reduces a lot of the Express boilerplates. When you look through this code, you have a lot of code, you have a lot of abstraction, but not so much that it's going to, but it clears up what you're reading so that way you can focus on your application logic and not get too tied down in the Express specific boilerplate. Okay, yeah, have a great day and enjoy. Happy New Year's. I'll see you all later on. This is Alex Merced from AlexMercedCoder.dev. Make sure you hit a like, leave a comment, subscribe, all that good YouTubey stuff. I'll see y'all later.